Imagine waking up to find your town at the center of a real-life crime drama. That's exactly what happened in Hanover, New Hampshire, when Leela Porter, a respected state trooper, was found dead under mysterious circumstances. The scene was set like a tragic play. Leela's body was discovered in her kitchen with a gunshot wound, and her own service weapon was staged next to her, suggesting a possible suicide. But the facts didn't line up. There was no sign anyone had broken in, and the gun was suspiciously clean. This prompted immediate doubts among the investigators. Led by the seasoned detective Garrett Lynch, the team quickly sensed that this was more than a simple case of suicide. As the community reeled from the news, the investigation began to peel back layers of Leela's seemingly perfect life, revealing a hidden affair with fellow trooper Alan Hayes. This discovery would lead the investigation down a path full of twists and emotional revelations. What comes next is a deep dive into the secrets that lay behind the facade of a dedicated officer's life. Stay with us as we explore the complexities of Leela Porter's story, a tale of love, betrayal, and mystery that shattered the calm of a small town. As the investigation unfolded, Detective Lynch and his team delved into the details of the crime scene. The lack of forced entry suggested that whoever was responsible had been familiar with Leela's home. This clue led the detectives to probe deeper into Leela's personal relationships, especially within the state police where she served. The more they dug, the more the facade of Leela's professional life began to crack. Despite her reputation as a committed and diligent trooper, Leela's private life told a different story, one of loneliness and emotional turmoil after her divorce. It was during this vulnerable time that Alan Hayes, a colleague and a senior trooper, entered her life. Their relationship, initially based on mutual respect and camaraderie, soon evolved into something much more intimate and complicated. Alan, known for his calm demeanor and professional integrity, was also facing his own personal crises. Married with children, his home life was strained, marked by a distant relationship with his wife, Deborah. As Leela and Alan grew closer, their affair began to take a toll on both their personal and professional lives. The detectives learned about the affair through interviews with colleagues and a thorough examination of Leela and Alan's communication, like emails and text messages. These revealed a relationship teetering between passion and volatility. Leela, longing for a real commitment, pressed Alan for more, while Alan struggled with the implications of their affair on his career and family life. This complex backdrop sets the stage for a deeper investigation, not only into the circumstances of Leela's death, but also into the intricate and often hidden relationships that defined her final days. What the detectives uncover next will challenge their assumptions and expose the high stakes of a forbidden affair within the tight-knit law enforcement community. As the case progressed, the emotional stakes heightened with each new piece of evidence. Detective Lynch, accustomed to unraveling the truth behind closed doors, found the complexity of Leela and Alan's affair particularly challenging. It was not just a question of who had the motive, but also of who had the opportunity to commit such a calculated act. The investigation took a pivotal turn when they analyzed the forensic evidence from the crime scene. Initially, the clean state of Leela's service weapon had raised suspicions. However, further analysis showed that the gun, though placed to suggest suicide, bore fingerprints that told a different story. Additionally, the autopsy results confirmed that the angle and distance of the gunshot made self-infliction highly unlikely. This critical evidence suggested premeditation and pointed directly towards someone who knew how to stage a crime scene to mislead investigators. The focus shifted increasingly towards Alan as they pieced together his whereabouts on the night of Leela's death. Security footage and phone records contradicted his alibis and placed him near Leela's home at the crucial time. The breakthrough came when a search of Alan's vehicle unearthed a jacket with gunpowder residue, aligning with the hypothesis that he was involved in the shooting. This discovery, coupled with the emotional testimony of Emily, who recounted overhearing a tense argument between her mother and Alan days before her death, added layers to the narrative of a relationship spiraling out of control. With these revelations, the investigation deepened. drawing a clearer picture of a man driven to the brink by personal and professional pressures. As the team prepared to confront Allen with the amassed evidence, the case underscored the tragic consequences of a hidden life colliding with undeniable reality. With the evidence mounting, Detective Lynch decided it was time to bring Allen in for questioning. The interrogation was a critical moment in the investigation. Allen, usually composed, showed visible signs of stress as Lynch methodically laid out the evidence before him. Initially, Allen clung to his narrative of innocence, denying any involvement in Leela's death and describing their relationship as nothing beyond professional boundaries. However, as the interrogation unfolded and the evidence was presented, especially the emails, text messages, and the gunpowder residue found on his jacket, Allen's facade began to crack. Faced with the undeniable proof of his presence at the crime scene and his involvement with Leela, he finally admitted to the affair, but continued to deny any role in her death. This admission shifted the dynamics of the case, allowing Lynch and his team to focus on piecing together the motive and opportunity that tied Allen to the crime. They examined the timeline of his actions on the night of the murder, which did not align with his initial statements. This discrepancy, combined with the forensic evidence and the testimonies of Leela's daughter and other witnesses, painted a compelling picture of a man overwhelmed by his double life. The investigation also uncovered the pressures Allen faced: his deteriorating marriage, the fear of losing his reputation, and his financial stability due to the affair coming to light. These factors contributed to a profile of someone who might go to great lengths to protect his secrets. As the evidence coalesced into a narrative of guilt, the community and the police department began to reel from the implications. A respected officer implicated in such a heinous act shook the foundations of trust and integrity that the force was built upon. The upcoming steps were to prepare for a trial that would not only seek justice for Leela, but also answer to a shaken community. The walls were closing in on Allen, and the case was about to move from the investigative phase to the judicial system, marking a transition from discovery to formal accusation. As the date of the trial approached, the whole town of Hanover watched with bated breath. The courtroom became a microcosm of the community's tension and anticipation. Prosecutor Marlene Carson took the lead, presenting a case that Allen had killed Leela to prevent the exposure of their affair, which would have threatened his family's stability and financial future. Carson argued that the combination of forensic evidence, such as the match between the bullet and Allen's service weapon and Allen's inconsistent alibis, pointed clearly to his guilt. She emphasized the gunpowder residue on Allen's jacket and the damning surveillance footage that placed him near Leela's home on the night of the murder. Throughout the trial, the courtroom heard emotional testimonies from Leela's friends, family, and colleagues, each adding depth to the narrative of Leela's life and the impact of her loss. Emily Porter, Leela's daughter, delivered a particularly poignant account of her mother's state in the weeks leading up to her death, highlighting the emotional distress caused by her tumultuous relationship with Allen. The defense, led by attorney Paul Grayson, attempted to shift the focus, suggesting that someone else could have had the motive and opportunity to commit the crime. Grayson highlighted gaps in the investigation and proposed alternative theories that pointed away from Allen. However, the lack of concrete evidence to support these theories made them less convincing. The trial was a meticulous process of piecing together timelines, motives, and opportunities. Each piece of evidence was scrutinized, each testimony weighed for its credibility. The prosecution built a narrative not just of a crime of passion, but of a premeditated act designed to protect a life built on lies. As the trial concluded, the jury was left to deliberate on a case that had captivated and disturbed the community. The evidence laid before them painted a picture of a man driven to the edge, who chose a permanent and tragic solution to his problems. The decision would soon be in their hands, determining whether Allen would face the ultimate consequence for his actions. The jury's deliberation was tense and fraught with the weight of the evidence they had been presented. After hours of discussion, they reached a verdict that would seal Allen Hayes' fate and bring a somber resolution to the turmoil that had gripped Hanover. The foreman stood, his voice steady as he delivered the decision, guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom, filled with a mix of relief and sorrow, watched as Alan was led away, his future irrevocably changed to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The sentence reflected the gravity of his actions and the irreversible loss of Leila Porter. In the aftermath of the trial, the community struggled to reconcile the image of Alan as a respected state trooper with the reality of his crime. His colleagues grappled with feelings of betrayal, while Leila's family began the difficult process of healing from their tragic loss. For Emily, the verdict provided a measure of justice, though it could not fill the void left by her mother's death. Deborah Hayes, who had been scrutinized during the trial, faced her own set of challenges. Although not implicated in the crime, the revelations about her husband's secret life and the public nature of the trial had a profound effect on her and their children. She decided to move away from Hanover, seeking a fresh start away from the shadows of the past. The case of Alan Hayes and Leila Porter remains a stark reminder of how deeply hidden secrets can fracture lives and communities. It serves as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of lies and the harsh consequences of actions taken in desperation. The impact of this case would resonate through Hanover for years, as those affected worked to rebuild their lives and restore a sense of normalcy in the wake of such a profound tragedy. In the years following the trial, the town of Hanover slowly began to heal, but the scars remained visible. Emily Porter, now older and more reflective, channeled her grief into advocacy, focusing on raising awareness about domestic violence and the hidden dangers in seemingly stable relationships. Her efforts were aimed at preventing others from suffering as her mother had, turning her personal tragedy into a public crusade for change. The police department also took steps to restore its tarnished reputation, implementing new protocols for handling personal relationships within the force and increasing transparency in their operations. These changes were partly a response to the public's demand for greater accountability and partly an attempt to regain the trust that had been severely damaged by the scandal. Community leaders organized forums and workshops, fostering discussions about safety, trust, and integrity. These initiatives helped the community come together, reinforcing the bonds that had been tested by the trial. Schools in Hanover introduced programs aimed at teaching students about the legal and ethical implications of their actions, inspired by the real-life lessons of the case. As for the broader implications, the story of Alan Hayes and Leila Porter was covered in various true crime documentaries and articles, analyzing the psychological and social factors that led to the murder. These narratives helped shed light on similar cases nationwide, sparking debates about relationship dynamics, mental health, and the pressures of law enforcement careers. Through these discussions and reflections, Hanover learned and grew stronger, embodying the resilience needed to move past such a dark chapter. The legacy of the case, with its complex interplay of personal failings and systemic issues, continued to influence conversations about justice and reform long after the courtroom had emptied. As the years passed, the legacy of the case between Alan Hayes and Leila Porter continued to resonate not just in Hanover, but across the country. It served as a poignant example in law enforcement training programs, where it was used to educate new officers about the ethical dilemmas and emotional challenges they might face in their careers. The story highlighted the importance of maintaining professional boundaries and the consequences of personal decisions on public trust and career longevity. Academics and researchers delved into the psychological aspects of the case, producing studies that explored the impact of stress and secrecy on individuals in high-stakes professions. These studies contributed to a broader understanding of workplace dynamics and were incorporated into discussions on occupational health and mental wellness. In popular culture, the dramatic elements of the case captivated audiences, leading to adaptations in television crime dramas and podcasts that dissected the intricate details of the investigation and trial. Each portrayal brought a new angle to the story, focusing on different aspects of the human condition, from betrayal and love to justice and redemption. The ongoing public interest in the case spurred a series of community-driven initiatives aimed at supporting those affected by similar tragedies. Victim support groups received increased funding, and outreach programs were established to help individuals dealing with the aftermath of publicized crimes, providing a network of support and counseling services. The story of what happened in Hanover served as a reminder of the ripple effects one act can have on a community and the broader societal implications. It became a catalyst for dialogue on how communities can better support each other in times of crisis and how to build resilience against the backdrop of human fallibility and the quest for justice. Over time, the case of Leila Porter and Alan Hayes became a touchstone in the field of criminal justice education. Universities and training academies developed case studies based on their story, using them to teach critical thinking, ethical decision-making, and investigative techniques. These educational modules emphasize the importance of transparency and ethical behavior in maintaining public trust and upholding the integrity of law enforcement. Legal professionals and ethics committees use the case as a basis for seminars and continuing education courses that examined legal strategies and ethical quandaries faced by officers and attorneys. These discussions often highlighted how personal failings could undermine professional responsibilities and the need for strict adherence to ethical standards in all aspects of legal work. The wider legal implications of the case also influenced policy discussions at local and national levels. Policymakers debated and sometimes enacted reforms aimed at preventing similar incidents, including better mental health resources for law enforcement officers, stricter oversight of professional behavior, and enhanced support systems for the families of those involved in criminal cases. Local libraries and community centers in Hanover and similar communities hosted book talks and panel discussions that featured authors and experts discussing the case and its impacts on society. These events served as platforms for raising awareness about domestic issues within law enforcement families, fostering a better informed public that could engage in meaningful advocacy and support efforts. Thus, the tragic events in Hanover transcended their local origins to spark a nationwide examination of deeper systemic issues, contributing to a dialogue about reform, resilience, and the human capacity for both error and redemption. As the narrative of Leila Porter and Alan Hayes continued to unfold in various forms and forums, it also inspired a series of non-fiction works. Authors and researchers delved into the case, producing detailed analyses that examine not just the personal and psychological dimensions of the individuals involved, but also the societal structures that influence their actions. These works contributed significantly to the public's understanding of the complexities surrounding crime and justice in small-town America. Documentaries and investigative reports further explored the ripple effects of the case, drawing connections between this and similar incidents around the country. These media pieces often focused on systemic failures and successes in handling cases involving law enforcement personnel, highlighting areas for systemic improvement and community engagement. Educational institutions, particularly those focusing on social work and psychology, integrated these findings into their curricula. This integration aimed to better prepare future professionals to handle similar challenges with a deeper awareness of the human factors at play, enhancing their ability to contribute positively to their communities and professions. Additionally, the case became a staple in ethics training for journalists and media professionals, emphasizing the balance between public interest and the privacy rights of those involved in high-profile cases. Media coverage of the case served as a case study in responsible reporting, prompting discussions about the impact of media on legal proceedings and the lives of individuals involved. Through all these avenues, the case of Leila Porter and Alan Hayes became a catalyst for ongoing education, discussion, and reform, underscoring the enduring impact of their story on American cultural, legal, and educational landscapes. The lasting impact of the Leila Porter and Alan Hayes case also permeated community healing and prevention strategies. Civic leaders and activists harnessed the story's elements to bolster community engagement initiatives aimed at preventing violence and promoting healthy relationships. Workshops and seminars became common, where experts discussed signs of emotional distress and effective communication within relationships, aiming to equip community members with the tools to intervene or seek help when needed. This focus extended into developing comprehensive support systems within the workplace, especially in high-stress professions like law enforcement. Wellness programs were enhanced, offering counseling and support for officers to manage personal and professional stresses more effectively. The aim was to prevent such tragic outcomes by addressing the root causes of emotional and psychological strain. Community arts programs also saw an opportunity to contribute, using theater and visual arts to explore themes of the case in ways that were accessible and impactful. These artistic interpretations helped process collective grief and facilitated discussions about personal responsibility and community safety. Meanwhile, annual memorials and dedicated spaces were established to honor the memory of Leela Porter, serving as community focal points for reflection and remembrance. These memorials also served as reminders of the community's resilience and commitment to ensuring that such tragedies are not repeated. Through these various channels, the legacy of the case encouraged a proactive approach to community safety and well-being, showcasing how collective efforts can lead to meaningful change and healing. In the broader context of national discourse, the Leela Porter and Alan Hayes case acted as a catalyst for legislative action aimed at improving oversight and accountability within law enforcement agencies. Advocacy groups, leveraging the momentum generated by the case, pushed for legislation that required more rigorous screening and ongoing psychological assessment of law enforcement personnel. These efforts were driven by the goal to identify and mitigate potential risks among officers, ensuring their ability to serve effectively and ethically. The discourse also influenced public policy on transparency and the relationship between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Town halls and public forums proliferated, providing platforms for citizens to voice concerns and for officials to outline steps being taken to ensure such a tragedy would not recur. These forums fostered a dialogue that was instrumental in rebuilding trust and understanding between the police force and community members. Furthermore, the case inspired national conferences on criminal justice reform, where experts, policymakers, and community leaders gathered to discuss systemic changes. These conferences often resulted in white papers and policy recommendations that influenced state and federal policies, emphasizing the importance of integrity and accountability. Grassroots movements, galvanized by the case, also took shape, focusing on enhancing the support networks available to families of law enforcement officials. These movements advocated for better access to resources like counseling and support groups, which were crucial for family members coping with the stresses associated with law enforcement careers. Overall, the case left an indelible mark on the national consciousness, driving forward changes that sought to balance the scales of justice and community welfare, ensuring that the lessons learned from Hanover were not forgotten, but instead used to enact positive change across the country. As the years progressed, the influence of the Leela Porter and Alan Hayes case extended into the academic realm, particularly in criminal justice and ethics courses across universities. The case became a staple in curriculum discussions concerning moral dilemmas faced by law enforcement officials. It served as a prime example of the conflicts between personal desires and professional duties, highlighting the critical need for ethical decision-making. Scholars used the case as a foundation for numerous research papers and theses, exploring the psychological impacts of dual identities within policing and the broader implications for community policing strategies. These academic works contributed to a richer understanding of the complexities within law enforcement roles and the pressures that can lead to ethical breaches. Moreover, the case spurred interest in developing advanced training simulations that used virtual reality (VR) technology to train police officers. These simulations were designed to help officers practice decision-making in high-stress situations, including managing personal crises that could impact their professional responsibilities. The goal was to prepare officers better to handle such pressures without compromising their roles or the safety of the communities they serve. Additionally, public interest in the case prompted several book releases, ranging from detailed investigative narratives to fictionalized accounts that drew heavily on the themes of the case. These books aim to provide readers with insights into the emotional and ethical challenges faced by those in law enforcement, bridging the gap between the public's perception and the realities of police work. Through these various avenues, the legacy of the case not only shaped policies and training, but also deeply influenced cultural and educational narratives, broadening the conversation about law enforcement and community interactions in contemporary society. Continuing the evolution of impact from the Leila Porter and Alan Hayes case, the subsequent discourse began influencing international perspectives on policing and justice. This global interest sparked cross-border collaborations focused on improving law enforcement practices and accountability measures, drawing from the lessons learned in Hanover. Internationally, the case was discussed at various symposiums and global law enforcement conferences, where it was presented as a case study on the consequences of ethical lapses in policing. These discussions emphasized the necessity for strong moral frameworks and support systems within police departments worldwide, encouraging an exchange of best practices among international law enforcement agencies. The global outreach did not stop at conferences. Educational institutions around the world incorporated the case into criminology and ethics courses, using it as a benchmark for discussing the universal challenges police officers face and the potential repercussions of their actions on a societal level. This inclusion helped foster a more holistic view of policing that considers both the personal challenges and the societal responsibilities of law enforcement personnel. Additionally, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, working on police reform and human rights began referencing the case in their advocacy efforts. They used it to highlight the need for comprehensive reforms in law enforcement that include not only better training and oversight, but also increased support for mental health and ethical decision-making. Through these various channels, the case of Leila Porter and Alan Hayes transcended its local origins, becoming a part of a global dialogue on justice and ethics in law enforcement. This worldwide discussion continues to influence policies and practices, aiming to ensure that law enforcement agencies around the globe can learn from past mistakes and work towards more ethical and effective policing. As the conversation around the Leila Porter and Alan Hayes case continued to evolve, its impact became a powerful catalyst for the development of new technologies aimed at enhancing law enforcement transparency and accountability. Startups and tech companies began innovating solutions such as body cameras with advanced features like real-time data streaming and AI-driven analytics to help monitor police interactions and ensure adherence to protocols. This technological shift also led to the creation of software platforms that facilitate greater community involvement in policing. These platforms enable citizens to report incidents directly and participate in community policing efforts, thereby fostering a more cooperative relationship between the police and the communities they serve. In the realm of policy, the case influenced the establishment of independent oversight committees designed to oversee police actions and investigate misconduct claims. These committees are often composed of a mix of law enforcement professionals, legal experts, and laypersons to ensure a balanced perspective on law enforcement activities. Furthermore, the ongoing public interest in the case inspired a series of public service announcements, PSAs, focused on ethical behavior and mental health support for law enforcement officers. These PSAs aim to reduce stigma and encourage officers to seek help when needed, promoting a healthier work environment and better overall community safety. Thus, the enduring legacy of this case continues to inspire innovations and reforms that seek to address the complex challenges facing law enforcement and community relations today, ensuring that the lessons learned continue to resonate and affect positive change.